Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. My guest today is attorney David B. Lever. He's the founder and senior partner of Lever Ecker. We're going to talk about the personal injury law that they do. David's been working, on behalf of accident victims since 1990, so quite a long time, 35 years. We're going to talk about his work and what's changed, if anything, in personal injury throughout all these decades and other issues. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Richard. It is a pleasure to be here.
Well, excellent. Well, so tell me, what gets you interested in law in the first place so many years ago?
Well, when I was a kid, apparently I was a little bit more argumentative than I am these days. And my parents would always say, you should be a lawyer when you grow up. So when I got to college and then I figured out what I was going to do was between law school or medical school, and I went the law school route. There were other things in all seriousness that put me into this direction, in this path. But essentially, I always knew that I was going to go to law school and become an attorney.
So once you come out of law school, actually, I was surprised to recently learn this. I think it's correct. So how does one become a family lawyer versus personal injury versus, whatever area? And I guess you have to apprentice essentially to learn a particular area of law.
Well, I would agree with that. I think some people know exactly what they want to do when they get out of law school in terms of what their focus should be. But other times people just fall into it. And I've spoken to people who have come even to interview with my office, and I've said to them, make sure that this is what you really want, because if you want to do something else, it's very easy to just move into a slightly different space, and all of a sudden your whole career in life changes because of that. For me, initially when I was young, I thought I was going to be a real estate attorney because I have a family that was in the real estate business. And then when I was 17 years old, I had a motorcycle accident, and I did a good number to myself. And over the years, I developed more issues with my neck. And I just felt that, how can I help people? And I thought that going into personal injury law would be a way that I could do that, and to use whatever skill set I had and whatever connections I had through the people that I originally worked for. I had also experienced when I was a kid, one of my parents' friends, they had a very close relative that was in a car accident, probably in the early 70s, when there were no airbags. And this woman ended up losing her eyesight. And I just remember it really hit me, because I just said to myself, 1 minute her life is perfect, and the next minute her world is turned upside down. And I believe that the representation that this person had was not ideal. Now, I recognize that no matter how much money a person could get, it doesn't give them back their health, which is the most important thing. But I do think that there is a sense of justice and an ability for people to regain a measure of dignity that is equally important. Obviously not as much as health, but just in terms of grounding them to feel that they had a chance to be heard, so to speak.
So what's happened to awards, for personal injury victims over the years. I know each case is different, but in general, it seems like there's been a lot of what's called reform. And I know that insurance agencies have gotten a lot smarter, and they have massive data collection and a system, even I believe called Colossus, that helps them sift through untold amounts of accidents and injury, and to find the to essentially pay as little as possible, if anything at all. What have you seen over 35 years in terms of compensation for victims?
Well, I think that the awards that we saw back 20, 30 years ago, they were way too low back then, and I still feel that they are low. There are a bunch of reasons for that, but I do believe that the plaintiff's bar has been successful in certain states in raising the sustainable award levels that a person can recover for a particular type of injury and damage. So we're always dealing with tort reform, where the insurance companies and the people that do their bidding are always out there trying to convince the public that people are receiving money for nothing. But I can tell you, in my experience, insurance companies have plenty of money and plenty of lawyers that defend their interests. And it's very rare that I see a person get the best of an insurance company, in the sense of, if you compare how many times an insurance company gets the best of an individual, I would say there's no comparison. I see that insurance companies, when they deal with people without a lawyer, they always take advantage. And I actually was speaking to a gentleman today who was speaking with the insurance company to try to resolve his claim directly. And he was just picking my brain to ask me if he felt that I could do better with the threat of litigation, and of course, actually beginning litigation, than he could. And I said to him, well, if the insurance companies were fair, guys like me wouldn't have a job, because you wouldn't need people like me, and I'd be doing something else. So I think that one of the most important things that I do, in addition to helping people through what in many cases is the most challenging time in their life, but I think that I am able to hold insurance companies honest and do an excellent job on behalf of my clients, getting them compensated fairly and appropriately, given the circumstances that each and every one of them have gone through.
What trends have you seen in personal injury law? We'll focus in on, auto accidents for a start. How do cars protect their occupants better or not in accidents? What are you seeing, injury patterns, or what's come up on your radar maybe in the past 5 years that is different from before?
Well, I would say that generally cars are safer than they were, but we also deal with, at least my perspective, is every other vehicle on the road is an SUV or a large vehicle. And so no matter what type of safety measures are put into place, there's no way to escape the inevitability of a person being injured when they're involved in a collision at speed with a vehicle that has significant mass. So I think that the use of seatbelts and airbags and whatnot, and anti-lock brakes and all of the other more modern advances have helped. But I do believe that there are still way too many people that are injured in car accidents. And hopefully what people like myself, what we do will continue to force the auto manufacturers and all of the powers that be to continue to make changes to make the roads safer, because when there's negligence and people are injured, for the most part, people are going to look to be made whole again. And nobody likes to have to write a check. And in a perfect world, nobody would be injured and I would be doing something else. But given that these things are going to happen, I feel that there's an important need for my services and, of course, all of the other personal injury lawyers who are out there fighting for their clients.
Have you noticed the pattern of injury has changed? Because like you said, a lot of cars now are SUVs and bigger vehicles, even though they have all these safety features, again, in crashes, what's happening to people physically more often nowadays?
Well, one thing that I think is more of an issue these days is more pedestrians being struck by vehicles, because the SUVs and the larger vehicles have a much higher center of gravity. And a lot of times, if someone is in a big SUV or a truck and they're making a turn, they may not be able to see the pedestrian in the roadway because the pedestrian isn't that high up compared to where they're sitting. I also think that because of the larger vehicles that are on the road, when someone is hit by a vehicle, instead of a person ending up on the hood of a car, they end up hitting the grill of a big SUV and end up under the vehicle. So to me, it seems that the injuries are more significant in many cases because of challenges like I just mentioned.
Sheesh. What about cars on cameras? I know that some will have forward facing. A lot of them have rear facing now. They're probably not activated while it's in drive, but is technology advancing in that regard where, I guess, all right, a couple questions in here. Is it recommended that anyone that has a car put in a, additional camera system so they can at least see out the front from a few angles what's going on? If they get into an accident, would that help substantiate their position or at least show what the reality was?
As a matter of fact, yes. The way I look at it is the cameras are very important because if someone is alleged to have caused an accident and you have a video camera that shows that they were not at fault, it gives them a leg to defend the case. On the other hand, if we have videotape showing that an accident that occurred to a client or really any individual was not their fault, it's much easier to prove that. I almost look at it as the video cameras are a good thing because if someone comes to me, I wasn't at the accident scene, so I can't necessarily say exactly what happened. And if I'm presented with a video that's inconsistent with what someone is telling me, it makes it very easy for me to tell that person that I can't represent them. So I look at the fact that there are video cameras as a good thing because there used to be cases in the past where you litigate something and you don't really know exactly what happened until the jury decides, or you could have a slip and fall in a building and the building has a camera, but they won't give it to you until you're in the middle of litigation. And I remember one case where I was a slip and fall on a wet floor and the person who came to me said that there was no sign up to indicate that the floor was wet. And the insurance company said, no, there was a sign up. And I said, well, if you have a video that shows that the sign was present, just give it to me. And then I will disengage and then you don't have to deal with unnecessary litigation. Now, of course, they never gave that video to me and it turns out that they didn't have it. But my feeling is it allows people to cut to the chase a little bit quicker. We had another case a couple of years ago where a fellow driving a Tesla was framed from behind by a company van, and the van driver told the police that my client had changed lanes and cut in front of the van. Turned out the Tesla has cameras, and sure enough, it proved that my client was telling the truth, and the defendant was not telling the truth. So I think that the cameras are helpful in both ways, right? Either for claimants and also for people who potentially have to defend something. If they didn't do anything wrong, then that should be proven out too.
What happens in court if someone's assertion is proved to be a lie? Are there extra penalties for that, or is just then just the award will go in the proper direction?
I think generally, unless the judge indicates that there is clear perjury, it's really just going to be a weighing of the evidence. The cases that we've had people who will get up there and put their hand and swear on a stack of Bibles that something happened when it didn't. I think that the juries will see that. And so generally speaking, there are no criminal repercussions from that. Of course, if you have a situation where someone is directed to perjure themselves testifying, that's a whole separate issue. But I would say it's very rare that comes up. It's usually just a question of the evidence is presented at trial, and if the case doesn't settle, the jury weighs all of that and hopefully comes to the right verdict.
Okay. What about these, I'm in Austin, and near the university, there's all these Waymos, these self-driving cars. Are you seeing any accidents coming from them, either from the occupants, getting into an accident where it's self-driving, or someone getting into a collision with one?
Personally, I haven't had that fact pattern come across my desk yet, but I do know that these self-driving cars are becoming more prevalent. They're a little scary to me. I remember there was an accident in California where a fellow was driving a vehicle and the self-driving mechanism sent him right into a retaining wall. And there was litigation against Tesla. And I believe that I know they were successful at trial. I don't know how that ultimately ended up on appeal, but it definitely is a little scary to me. I know that Waymo is branching out into different cities. And my concern is that these vehicles aren't used in testing in the real world, so that people become guinea pigs if if something goes wrong. I think at some point it will make a big difference because there are plenty of driver errors on the road, whether people driving under the influence or people who are looking at their phones when they shouldn't, or people who are just bad drivers. So anything that can make the road safer, I'm all for.
Well, essentially, I mean, if you're they seem to be clustered around universities. So yes, there's university staff that drive around. Yes, there's regular folks that drive around, but a lot of the cars that would think are student-driven cars. So you're mixing, cars that are driving themselves with newer drivers or inexperienced ones or more wild ones, at least according to insurance premiums. So it seems like a recipe for problems, but I guess it's unusual that there haven't been many, or it doesn't seem to be.
Well, I think there are more of these every day, but I still think that the percentage of self-driving vehicles on the road compared to driver-operated vehicles is very low. And I am concerned about what will happen. I know that some of these self-driving vehicles sometimes have trouble picking up certain things, whether it's pedestrians or other vehicles that come at different angles. And I hope that these continue to be tested off-site before people are put in harm's way.
And how about Uber and Lyft? Do you see cases where the Uber driver gets into trouble and the passengers are affected or not affected with accidents, or what are you seeing there?
Well, we've seen quite a few accidents involving rideshare vehicles. The good news in New York is that anywhere outside of New York City, these Uber and Lyft vehicles, when the app is active, have to maintain a level of bodily injury liability insurance that is well above what the minimum standard is in New York. So in the event that people are injured due to an Uber driver or Lyft driver's negligence, at least they have the ability to hopefully be made whole. I've seen way too many cases over my career where people sustain catastrophic injuries. Sometimes they don't even survive, and we have to then tell either a widow or children who have lost a parent that there was limited insurance. So the fact that the Ubers and Lyfts have to, generally speaking, outside of New York City, have to maintain higher limits, again, doesn't bring back someone who unfortunately has lost their life or someone who's had a catastrophic injury. It doesn't help them to get back to normal, but at least it gives them a chance to feel like they weren't victimized twice, right? First, because of the accident, and second time, because now they've lost their livelihood. Maybe they need medical care for the rest of their life, and they're told that the amount of money that they can recover through a third-party lawsuit is really de minimis. And if you have to enter judgment against many defendants, I found that if there's not adequate insurance, that you can get a judgment of millions of dollars, but trying to collect on that is very, very difficult over and above insurance coverage.
Yeah, what happens if once you hit policy limits on a case? Where can you go for compensation? I guess just the other party, but you have to sue them civilly? And
well, we never sue the insurance companies in a typical lawsuit setting. So we would sue defendant John Smith. And if the case doesn't settle and we go to trial and we take a verdict and the verdict exceeds the coverage limits, at that point, the insurance companies will either take an appeal to kick the can down the road in the hope that they can find a way to get that reversed or reduced, or they'll then try to offer up their coverage. We had a case just recently with a fellow who was rear-ended by a truck, and he was injured pretty severely, and there was $1 million in insurance, and the defendant's insurance company never formally offered more than $100,000. So we said, all right, well, you make it easy for us. We tried that case last month, and the jury came back at $2.95 million. And so now, of course, they've come to us and they've offered the $1 million plus some interest on it. But from our standpoint, we're not so quick to take it. There are certain situations where you can collect on an excess verdict/judgment against a defendant if they have assets, or if an insurance company has been shown to have acted in bad faith. There are times where you can pursue the full amount of the the award against the insurance company.
Sure. For an example, what would constitute bad faith?
Well, bad faith would be, I give you another example. I had a case many years ago where the person I was representing had a brother who was killed in an accident. He was a passenger in a vehicle where the driver was intoxicated and went to jail for a good amount of time. And there were 3 passengers in the car, and 2 of them passed away, and the other fellow was grievously injured. And there was only $300,000 of insurance available from the insurance company, and they never offered it. And so what we did is we made a record, a bad faith record. And then finally, at one point, the judge called in the insurance adjuster from the insurance company and said, if you don't put the money up by tomorrow, please understand that if the plaintiffs go to trial and they take a verdict, that you're going to be deemed to be in bad faith. So the bad faith claims come when, let's say, you have no dispute on liability and you have, let's say, $100,000 of insurance, but you have an injury that's worth a couple $1 million. There's no good reason for the insurance company not to tender their coverage. There are times that if the insurance company has a good defense, then arguably there may not be bad faith, but there are some times that it's very, very apparent that they're just trying to drag things out and just sit on their money for as long as they can.
Okay. Oh, one thing I forgot to ask you about some of the newer cars, the electric vehicles. I know they put in sound so when they're moving at low speed, you can hear it, like these weird sounds. But are you seeing accidents where people are not hearing, a low velocity electric vehicle and getting hit by one, getting crushed, run over, whatever it may be?
I've seen that a few times. I haven't come across that too often yet, but it's obviously a concern. If you can't hear a vehicle approaching, it's a lot harder to be aware of it than if you can hear it. I think there'll probably be more of that in the future, but as of now, I don't think that that's been a big issue, at least not from my practice.
What about if there's an accident? I guess nowadays, with I don't know, maybe not a lot of people, but at least some having cameras in their cars, is it difficult to find what other cars were in the vicinity and then ask the owners to give over their video footage if they have them? Like, if I'm in an accident, I guess if I have my wits about me, can I try to write down license plates? Let's say they were in the area, or how would I know how to get what other eyes have seen, what other cameras have seen?
Well, I've seen it more in the context of if there's an accident that takes place, we usually send an investigator. I shouldn't say usually. We always send an investigator out as quickly as we can to canvass the area and see if there are any cameras such as Ring doorbells from homes or cameras from businesses or even street cameras. And we've had some success with that. You usually have to move pretty quickly because most of these cameras, they're on a loop. So it could be 3 days, it could be 7 days. But many times if you can't get that camera or access to it quickly, you're not going to be able to get it. As far as cameras from other vehicles that are not involved in the accident, we haven't really had much luck with that because usually we can't get the identity of those vehicles.
Okay. I guess what you do is you send out an investigator, and then if it looks like there could be footage, you give them a paper that says you're ordered to preserve anything you have, and turn off your loop and your camera. What if someone has a 7-day loop and you're there day 3 and you ask them for it and they don't give it to you, or they just let it loop over it and erase it? Are they liable somehow for not providing that or allowing it to be destroyed?
Well, there are times where the target defendant might have a video camera. And then what we'll do is we will serve them with what's called a preservation letter and advising them that if they get rid of the evidence, in other words, spoliate the evidence, that that can and will be used against them. But if you're talking about someone that has nothing to do with the accident, just an adjacent property owner, and they don't preserve it, it's much, much harder to enforce that because they have no stake in the case. I had a case years ago where a woman fell in a department store, in the shoe department, and it turned out that they had cameras, but the defendants kept telling me that there was no footage. And then finally, when the court ordered them to turn it over, we got the footage, but there was 2 minutes missing in the footage, which happened to be during the time that my client had fallen. And the judge got so pissed off that he actually struck the defendant's answer. In other words, said that you can't even defend the case on liability. To get an answer struck is not always very easy because if you have other ways that you can prove liability, the court may not strike the answer, but what they can do is they would give a charge for an adverse inference to the jury, and the jury would be told that they can conclude that the absence of the footage, that if that footage had been presented, that it would have been against the party that had spoliated it. So it can be very important in a case.
Yeah, very interesting. What about smartphones? I guess, since they're ubiquitous, what information can be learned or subpoenaed from smartphone usage? Do you always see if like one of the people involved was texting at the time? Or, what else can you find what can you find from phone usage?
Well, in many cases, the court won't automatically give you access to someone's phone. You have to be able to show, for example, somebody might say, oh, I saw them on their phone or I saw them texting, and that sets up the foundation to get you that. But when you do have access to that, you're looking to see if they're actually on the phone talking or if they're texting, or even you can look at app usage. So there are many people who are just on their phones looking at apps when they're on the road. And we're seeing more of that in terms of the courts being willing to compel the other side to produce that information. But it's not a slam dunk that we always can get it. But when we think that it's appropriate, we push really hard to get that.
Okay. And you talked about this in the beginning of the conversation. You could just, I guess, tell or hear that some people think, oh, I'll just defend it on my own. I don't need an attorney, or I'll try to get a settlement on my own. How is that absurd? I know it's an old question. Why hire a personal injury lawyer if there's been an accident and you've been injured? Like, why? What's the basic answer to the question?
Well, I would say there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the insurance companies know that they can take advantage of someone who is not an attorney. No matter how smart that person might be, it's not what they do every day for a living. So the insurance companies know that if they don't have a lawyer, that there's no way for that person to really leverage against the insurance company. That's one reason. Number two, when people have an accident and they come to my firm, I always say to them, our job is not just to sit back behind the desk and just wait to collect a settlement check. Our job is to also help you navigate a very challenging process. So there's a lot of paperwork that comes into play when people have accidents. There are issues with who's going to pay for medical treatment. There's issues with, are they entitled to short-term disability? Are they entitled to receiving any monies for loss of earnings while they're out of work? And so what I always tell people is when they come to us, they have two things to worry about. And one is to do everything they can to try to get healthy, to get their life back on track. And the other thing is to leave everything up to us, because anything that comes up in a case, in all likelihood, is something that I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of times over my career. And if people are dealing with the insurance companies directly, they may not know what the insurance companies are entitled to get from them. And therefore, a lot of times I find that the insurance companies get information from people and then they look to use it to their advantage to protect the insurance company and their insured to the detriment of an injured party. So I would say that if someone came to me and there was limited insurance and I knew that they could get that and that they didn't need me, I would never take the case. I would guide them accordingly because unless I'm creating value for a client, I don't feel that I have the right to put my hand in their pocket for even one penny.
Yeah, makes sense. Why is the property side of it, the car damage, not usually the purview of a personal injury lawyer?
Well, if we have a client that was, let's say, in a car accident and they have significant property damage, if they have collision coverage, they may be able to just go first party with that so that they don't have to sue for that. We do have clients that may not have collision coverage, and we have to include the property damage claim in their lawsuit. We will do that for clients. If they came to us just with a property damage claim without any personal injury component, we would respectfully tell them that we don't handle matters like that. But if a client has a property damage claim and we're representing them for the personal injury claim, we have no problem asserting that claim for recovery.
Okay. I guess in totality, it's like what indicators would someone use to decide whether they should, speak to a personal injury attorney? I mean, it doesn't cost anything up front. And, as far as I understand, it's contingency. So you get paid on the back end, a third of the winnings or, 40% if it goes to trial, I guess is typical. But what do you see that holds people back from, again, speaking to a personal injury attorney?
Well, I think a lot of people, they feel awkward about it. I've had plenty of people come to me and say, David, this isn't the type of person that I am. I usually don't do this type of thing. So a lot of people almost feel guilty about it. There are also quite a few people who just don't know their rights. So one of the things that we do at our firm is we provide information and we try to educate people so that they at least have a better understanding of what rights they have. And then it's always their choice whether they choose to pursue it or not. But I tell people that there's a reason that there's insurance. And so if someone is injured through no fault of their own, they have two choices. They could either tough it out and not be compensated for their losses. Again, I'm not talking about a windfall. I'm just talking about someone's ability to get their medical bills paid, to get paid for being out of work, to be compensated fairly and fully for their pain and suffering. Because if somebody breaks their leg and they can never walk right again, I mean, they didn't bargain for that. And therefore, I tell them that they can choose not to pursue it, but the insurance company will be very happy to keep that money and add it to their profit margin, or they can pursue a claim in an effort to seek justice and hold the people responsible accountable and ultimately try to be made whole again. Because under the law, there's no way that we can give someone back what they've lost because we can't go back in time and give them a healthy body part. But what we can do is try to compensate them for what they've lost through money.
Okay, well, very good. Well, what areas do you serve? So if someone is listening and they've been involved in an accident, we'll get into how they can contact you in a second. But where could the accident have happened where you could still help them?
Well, our main office is in White Plains, New York, so in Westchester County. We do have offices in the Bronx and Queens in New York City. I would say that most of our work is in the New York metro area, but we've handled cases throughout the state. If the case is substantial enough, we will travel for it. There are also times that we get calls for cases that we may partner up with local counsel. If we think it's in the best interest of the client, that we do so. I mean, we've helped people from all over the country. I even had a lady from Ireland years ago who was in an accident on a train in Philadelphia, and we were able to help her. Now, we don't litigate cases outside of New York because our practice is predominantly, like I said, focused on litigating cases in New York, but we have attorneys that we've worked with over the years, pretty much every state. So if someone contacts us and they had an accident on vacation, we will try to put them in the best hands possible. And that's always our goal because, at the end of the day, you have to say to yourself, why are you doing this? And yes, everyone has to keep a roof over their head, but it really is about how do you make a difference for other people? And that's how I practice and that's how I live my life.
Okay, excellent. And the best way for people to contact you is what? What's the URL for your site or the best way to Google you?
Sure. The URL is www.leverecker.com. So LEVERECKER. They can always call us at our main phone number, 914-288-9191. There are also ways they can contact us through the website. There are contact forms and things of that nature. But anybody that we can provide information and educate, we're more than happy to do it. There are many people who just don't pursue their rights when they have a valid claim. And there are times people call us and we tell them, well, I don't think you have a claim. But I think people will, looking back on things, will always be better off knowing that they investigated it and at least got an opinion from someone professional who can tell them, in my humble opinion, I think you have a good faith basis to move forward or you don't. So myself and my partners and everyone at my office, we are available to speak to anybody that has questions about an accident and how to proceed.
Well, very good. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Richard, I appreciate your time and your questions, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
If you like this podcast, Please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.